The only person that has that much power over me to cause me to react in that way is God. And you're certainly not God.
This episode is brought to you by my novel, Innocent Guilt, found on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. I'm Terrence Hardge with my co-host, Jamise Grace. Our guest today is a global lead for a large tech firm and a current academic PhD in equality, diversity, and inclusion. Welcome, Shirleena Celestine.
Hello.
Thank you for joining me.
Welcome. Hello. I have a question. I've experienced in my career field, if you will, just a lot of feeling like I was less than. I've pretty much been the only Black person with the majority of jobs that I've worked in, especially when I go a little bit higher, like being a supervisor or working more so in a corporate environment, if you will. One of the things that sticks out to me is I worked at a state facility and I was promoted as a supervisor, and the person who promoted me or the person who I was going to be under, she literally told me that I was a diversity hire. So I took offense to that immediately, but I don't know if that is considered a microaggression. Would that be more so of a bigger type of aggression?
Yeah, I think when it comes to microaggressions, what is actually tied to it is also intention. Microaggressions could be described as an instance or something that is subtle or unintentional is another word, discrimination against a underrepresented community. Looping back to exactly what you're saying, the real question would be, what was the intention of her giving you that information? And so it's a possibility, especially because it made you feel uncomfortable. It made you feel a little bit out of sorts. And so absolutely, it can be still seen as a microaggression, because ultimately an individual coming to you and rather than saying, congratulations, we're so glad you're here and we're wishing you every success and I'm here if you need anything, the conversation is, well, you were just a DEI hire. When you unpack that, the question is, why are you telling me that information? What's the goal of you giving me that information? It's almost to some extent invalidating who you are and the role that you're actually within, and
the effort I put into getting that role.
Yeah. And then the invalidation comes by way of, you are a DEI, and if we look into that, there's intersections to your identity. So is it that you're saying I'm a DEI because I'm a woman? Or is it the fact that I'm a DEI based on I am Black? Or is it that I'm a Black woman? And often our gut, tends to lead. And certainly if it's making you feel as though you're saying that to me because either I'm Black or either because I'm a woman or because it's the intersectionality of a Black woman, then that absolutely can be deemed as a microaggression, because you're using my identity to drive a point, but drive it in a negative way that gives me a negative experience.
So is it more so how they intended it or how I receive it, or both?
It can be a mixture of both, because we also have something that's very commonly known as unconscious bias, meaning I'm not meaning to be consciously biased towards you, but this is something that is unconsciously done. But also then going back to what I'd mentioned earlier, which is, what's the intention and motive for you telling me this information? And that's what then loops into another topic that I tend to tap into, which is emotional intelligence. Thinking about what I'm saying to you and how is that making you feel? Because one could argue that if you feel so passionate that I'm a DEI hire, well, I have nothing to do with that. Why not take it to the people that have all that power? You bringing that to me Where are we going with this?
So would the next step be to ask what the intention is, or how do you handle
yes.
that?
That's always
Okay.
my favorite. That's always my favorite question, as I always like to say to people, is in a very calm voice, what do you mean by that? Just
That kind of takes me into my question. How do you handle those moments? Is it best just to confront it head on?
yeah, I think if you feel confident to ask what's almost seen as further questions, then absolutely you're within your right, because we're all free to ask questions. But it's also on the other side that if your senses are telling you, I don't feel comfortable by what you said, or I'm not feeling comfortable in this conversation, you also have the right to say, thank you, and leave. Because this is also about the protection of your well-being and your mental well-being and your spirit at that. And so if you do want to ask further questions, I always encourage people to start with, what do you mean by that? Because that also, it's holding the person, yes, accountable, but it's also got a layer of what's known as positive intent, which is, oh, maybe you didn't mean it that way. So I'm really giving you the opportunity to essentially just explain what you mean by that. Now, if that person turns around and says, well, I think they hired you because you're Black. Okay, understood. And understanding that they hired me because I am Black, do you see that as being a problem?
I love it. I think
So it's kind of like you're interviewing that person, you know what I mean? And then that also protects you, I think, a little bit as well, because often when these types of questions come, if the motive is conscious or unconscious, we can internalize. And so we take that question, you are just a DEI hire. So you take that question and you put it on the inside, and then that then knocks on the door of what is then known as imposter syndrome. I don't feel good enough. I'm not qualified,
Wow.
So,
okay.
so rather than internalize, you say, oh no, let's keep this where it is. What do you mean by that? Oh, because I'm a Black woman, or I'm a Black person, or I'm a woman. Okay. And do you see that being a problem?
you're going to kind of help us a little bit with that, because I have definitely been a person that's internalized. I can definitely do precisely what you described, but I think a lot of us can walk away from a situation thinking, did I just really let them get away with saying that to me?
Yeah, that remorse, right? Like I should have said.
Yeah.
So, and I actually have like a passive aggressive, just full disclosure approach to situations like that. I'll overthink and I'm like, should I say something about that? How will it look if I say something about it?
Yeah.
And I like what you said about just simply asking the question, because it's just a question. It's not, being defensive. It's just you're trying to get clarification.
Yeah. It's just, and I think like another principle that I try to operate by myself and encourage others is the principle of slow down, like slow down time, because in those kinds of conversations they're quite quick. Like someone said something, I'm going to react. No, I always think you don't have that kind of power over me to cause me to react to you that fast. I'm totally in control of all of my reactions. And so it is practice. And, sometimes I think, people might be a bit uncomfortable, but I don't mind, because it's about the protection of my well-being. That if somebody asks me a question, there's no law that says, boom, you have to answer straight away. Someone can ask you a question, just give it one beat before anything comes out your mouth. So they say, oh, I think that, you were just a DEI hire. They're expecting you to say, oh my gosh, or really, or no, I think that you were a DEI hire. Okay. Okay, what do you mean by that? Don't react, because I think like the world that we're in like these quick transactions, and we always give a response so quick. Someone says something, when those instincts or that feeling comes and something said, something doesn't feel good or it feels a bit off, use that literally, even if you just count for 5 seconds. Think about, what did you just say to me? Because that will also help with the, I should have given them a piece of my mind. In other words, not that you should, because I always think, well, why am I giving you a piece of my mind? It's mine. I mean, none of it. But it's more the case of just giving yourself the grace and the beat to say, do I want to ask a question, or do I just want to say, okay, I got it, thanks, and leave? You are in control of your own reactions. The only person that has that much power over me to cause me to react in that way is God. And you're certainly not God. So I don't have to react to you.
Shirleena, what do you say to the person not used to living like this? To that person who does not have the emotional intelligence, they just know how it made them feel. And so they're ready to roll some necks, they ready to roll some heads.
Yeah.
That's not me, by the way.
That's
No,
not
I'm
you.
not
That's
saying,
not you.
I don't suppose. No, I think one, like I said, it's a practice, it's a discipline. You've got to be able to have the honest conversation with yourself before you get into a conversation like that. You have to. And that's why, to a reasonable extent, knowing yourself, knowing your reactions is really important. Because, you know, like you said, I know that I am, and I hope I'm saying this correctly in terms of what you just said, a passive aggressive person at times answering certain questions. Okay, so that's, you know that about yourself. And so knowing that about yourself, it's then giving yourself the grace to say, okay, as I journey through that, and as I'm working through that, I need to be able to understand when I'm in a situation that I just don't feel comfortable, or I feel like I'm being triggered. For me, I'm not at a place where I can start to ask questions. So the best reaction I can say is, thank you, I got it, I'm leaving. But that is a conscious decision, because
that makes sense.
Because ultimately, if you don't make that as a decision to know yourself, to your exact point, Terrence, you can end up in a situation where you're like, I just ain't there. Okay, that's great that you're not there, but at what point are you going to get there? Because if you don't, you're going to have this repeated cycle of having responses with regret. So we all at some point have to be mature. And it doesn't mean you have to be perfect, but you just have to give yourself enough to know, no, I need to leave this conversation. I need to leave. And so, it's practice.
I was just about to ask, like, can you kind of reiterate as to how you get to that point if you know you're not, there where you can't respond?
It really is practice. And you may have some boo-boos. You may have some boo-boos when you go off, but it's really a case of you've got to do work before you get to that conversation.
Can you kind of explain, like, how do you do that work without?
So I think in the first instance, it's really about, one, like I said, having that honest conversation with yourself, having the bravery to have someone maybe in your life that, yeah, they know you really well, but they're not just going to agree with everything that you're going to say, to be able to have that conversation about yourself externally to someone else, to say, hey, I'm working on this as an area for myself. Give me your point of view. What do you think? So that you can hear externally an external point of view and be open and be willing to listen. So in my instance, my best friend is my husband. I don't always want to hear what I don't want to hear. However, because I know he loves me and his intention towards me is always good. And it doesn't have to be a spouse. It can be a family member. It can be a really great friend. Just someone that loves you, that means you absolute no harm. to be able to have this honest conversation to say, hey, I'm working on this as an area. I want to get your opinion. What do you think? Have you experienced this from me? What are your thoughts? Etc., etc. Because now you're putting yourself in the space of do the work. And then from that friend, you could also do research. You can, I mean, the fact that we've got the internet is just a wonder, you know, on any topic you want to research. But then again, once you've clearly identified, I'm short-tempered, or I'm snappy, or I'm not the greatest listener, you can do that extra piece of research in how to react or how to slow down in the moment. But you got to do all that work before you get to that situation. So that when that situation comes up and someone says, oh, I just think that you were a DEI hire, you take a beat and then that information will come back to you. But as a way of simplifying, what I can give you tangible now is either say, thank you, I got it, and keep it moving. Or you can say, what do you mean by that? And even if they give you an answer, let's say they give you an answer that's even more triggering, you can exit because you still have, I got it, thank you.
Now,
And
Shirleena, you trying to add on to my job, because if she say thank you, she's going to be firing up my phone, telling me exactly what happened. We got to give her a real solution.
No, honestly, I think that I can do that because I have two parts of me, like I guess a lot of people do as it relates to work person and home person. And I feel like I can be very professional and I can think about situations as they are occurring. The trigger is where I kind of have the issue. But I really like the idea of being able to say, what do you mean by that? I can do that. That'll be easy.
It's simple.
That'll be easy.
It's a simple
now the next part might be
think about those things that trigger you and ask yourself, why am I getting so upset? Why is that even bothering me? And this is where you can get your journal and some paper, and you can do it by yourself, or you can do it as an exercise with somebody else to say, why did that trigger me? Now, to give an example, in a place that I used to work, I was just out minding my own business and so forth. And I had something that I was trying to get sorted. And somebody was trying to block me and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, I think I need to challenge that a little bit more, because what they're saying, I know it's not correct. And I was speaking to a work colleague, and while I thought that they were kind of supporting me, I later on learned, no, they weren't really. But in that moment, he turned around and said to me, oh, you're so emotional.
Whoa, that was triggering.
Okay. That's a trigger.
That was very
for a woman. And he said it with so much like, I want you to understand. And he just turned around and said, gosh, you're so emotional. And in that particular instance, I was like, oh, okay. And I said to myself, I don't actually want to respond to that. I said this on the inside. I was like, I don't want to respond to that. So all I said to him was, oh, okay. And I left. Now, don't get it twisted on the inside. But my choice was, and again, it was practice. There's nothing that you can ever do to cause me to react to you. You just can't, you're just not that powerful. But that's a journey. Now, later on, I had to ask myself the hard questions. Why did that bother you? And when I started to unpack it, you're so emotional. Why is that even a bad statement? And I was saying to myself, well, I think it was because I feel as though that statement somehow reflects I'm a woman that's not that I'm not in control, I'm weak, I'm not taken seriously, I'm a bit erratic. So someone saying you're just so emotional was taken away, I felt, from who I felt I identify as. I'm strong and I'm bold. But then it was after I did that, and I was like, it's because it was giving me a feeling that I wasn't strong and I wasn't bold. And then I had to keep unpacking it. Yeah, but who said it to you? Well, it was my work colleague. Okay, and they are to you who exactly? Well, they're a work colleague. Does what they say carry that much value on your identity? Well, not really. So why did it bother you then? And I learned a lesson. Shirleena, you are giving your value to somebody else to make a comment on. And when they comment on it, because you gave it to them in that small moment, that's what makes you feel triggered some kind of way. However, if you keep it where it is, which is, I know who I am. I know the value of who I am. What you're saying is just a statement. It doesn't mean it's true. It's just a statement. Doesn't mean it's true. And you are free to say whatever you want to say. And it was the big lesson that I learned, that just because somebody said it, don't mean it's true. It's just a statement.
You know what I really like about what you're saying is that you're not only challenging the speaker, but you're also challenging the receiver of the information, because we do need to ask ourselves those poignant questions. Why did that bother me? Maybe it's me. And so I like the way you encourage us to unpack these things.
This has just really made me realize that it's always more about me than it is the other person. Wow.
Yeah.
It's kind of scary.
If you catch that revelation, and it sounds like you definitely are catching that revelation, which is, oh, it's not you that determines how I feel, it's me. Because there's nothing you can say. If I make up my mind that what you're saying, it doesn't carry value in the best possible way, then all you said was a statement. Microaggressions and identity potentially do have an intersection, to understand that we may not always be able to be in control of a microaggression. We may not be able to stop it, or even with the best intention, no matter how much training and development that you put people through at work, and allyship training and unconscious bias, sometimes it is what it is. Some people are just going to be just that little bit mean. But on the other side of the conversation, but still part of what I think should still be part heavily of the conversation of microaggressions, is identity. To understand the reaction and what choices do I have in the scope of microaggression. And the choice that I have is to strengthen myself and know my own identity and my own value, and just know, where do I put that value, and to be really thoughtful about, do I trust you with my heart? Do I trust you with my value? Do I want to give it to you right now? And these are all questions that you have a right to ask. My husband always said, the people at work, they're not your friends. And to a reasonable extent, he's not wrong, because really what it's talking about is, where's the value in terms of where are you placing it? And be thoughtful and be careful, because you may feel you know your work colleagues so intimately, but you may not necessarily. So we have to always be conscious, I think, about our value and where we carry it and who we give it to.
That's really good. That's awesome. Shirleena, I want to thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. And my friends, go spread joy with a contagious smile, and a hug doesn't hurt. You never know what life you might be changing or whose heart you might be healing. Thank you for joining us.